Noah Winters didn't come to Lake Briar to pick fights. He came to rebuild. After 20 years in logistics, and a burnout so severe it put him in the hospital, he and his wife Ella traded traffic for tree frogs. The lake cabin had been in Ella's family for 3 generations, untouched, off-grid, and built like a log fortress. It was the kind of place where days were marked by sunrise and the sizzle of fish over fire. But the peace didn't last long. Their nearest neighbor Karen Albridge introduced herself with a pair of binoculars and a clipboard. Within a week of moving in, Noah had counted 5 separate courtesy notes nailed to their gate. Complaints about firewood stacking, the color of their mailbox, and once believe it or not a duck feeder. Eller had brushed it off. Every Hoa has a watchdog, Noah said. This one has rabies. Still, they kept to themselves. They weren't part of the Hoa anyway. Their land sat just outside the official borders. The cabin had been there long before this subdivision grew like mold around the lake's edge. They figured Karen would eventually realize that and leave them alone. They were wrong. It happened on a Tuesday morning. Eller was strapping on her hiking gear, boots, vest, compass, and the small holstered sidearm she always wore. She'd been a Navy investigator before becoming a state-certified wildlife ranger, and she never traveled the woods without protection. Coyotes didn't care about boundaries. Noah was on the porch brushing flakes of pine sap off his axe handle when he heard the footsteps step fast, loud, and aimed right at them. Karen was marching across the dock like she was storming a battlefield. Her lips were pursed so tight her chin quivered. She didn't bother with pleasantries, just held up a thick printout of some Hoa packet, her pointer finger stabbing through the air. You are in violation of Community Ordinance 9.14, she barked. Ella glanced up from her backpack. Excuse me, Karen's voice rose. Open display of a firearm. You are making residents feel unsafe. Noah stood slowly, hands in his pockets. We're not residents. This land is private, legacy deed, no Hoa coverage. Karen's eyes narrowed. That may be true for taxes, but the community shares the shoreline. Visual safety violations affect all of us. Ella kept her tone even. I'm licensed, certified. This holster stays with me when I'm in the woods. It's state law. Karen held her ground, shaking the paper. It's not just about law, it's about atmosphere. About the message it sends. Noah smirked. The only message here is, don't trespass with attitude. Karen scoffed. I will be reporting this to the board. You can expect a formal notice. And with that, she turned on her heel and stormed back up the path, muttering something about dangerous people thinking they're above the rules. Noah looked at Eller, who was now calmly checking the straps on her backpack. You think she's serious? Ella shrugged. Probably. But her rules don't apply here. I've seen less effort go into murder trials. Ella chuckled, then pulled her ranger cap low over her eyes. Let her play sheriff. We'll just keep living. But Noah couldn't shake the feeling. Karen had the manic focus of someone who needed a cause, and if she couldn't control their land legally, she'd find some other way to make their life miserable. By nightfall, Noah spotted her outside again on her own dock with binoculars trained right at their cabin. He closed the curtains and sighed. This wasn't going to be one of those peaceful retirements. This was going to be a battle. Only he didn't know yet that Karen was already drawing up legal fire. And what she wrote on the lawsuit would make a judge question her sanity and then question her soci. All title 3 mornings after their confrontation. A certified envelope arrived at the cabin. Noah heard the courier before he saw him, tires crunching gravel, a door slam, then a voice calling out from behind the porch railing. Winter's residence. Noah signed for the package and shut the door behind him, holding the stiff manila envelope like it might hiss. "Let me guess," Ella said, not looking up from her fly-tying bench. Karen strikes again. He broke the seal and skimmed the first page. His lips parted, then tightened. "She filed an official complaint," he said, slowly, "under her name. Says you threatened her with a firearm. And she's requesting a court order banning firearms on all Hoa-accessible property." Ella's hand paused mid-knot. "You're kidding." Noah held up. Karen Albridge v. Eller Winters. Plaintiff title, President, Pinebriar Estates Hoa. Ella laughed, short and sharp. "She's not even on the board. That seat's been empty since Jack DeSoto moved to Alabama last year." "And this gets better," Noah added. "She included a blurry photo of you from the side, standing on our porch. Says it was taken in the interest of public safety." Ella leaned back in her chair and stared at the ceiling. "She took a picture of me on my own porch with a legally holstered sidearm. And now she's filing a weapons complaint based on a position she doesn't actually have." "Apparently, yes," Eller exhaled. "She's not brave. She's desperate." Noah picked up his phone and called Colreiner. Cole was a longtime friend from his logistics days, a man with a talent for turning bureaucracy into a blunt weapon. He'd left corporate legal to start his own firm in the next town, overtired of contracts, but never tired of a good fight. When Noah gave him the details, Cole's voice didn't rise. It got quieter. "She filed as Hoa president." "Yep," in bold letters, like it's her middle name. "Does she have jurisdiction over your property?" "No." "Then she just submitted a frivolous complaint under a false title," Cole said. "That's to counts already. You want me to bury her with a countersuit?" Noah looked at Ella. Her arms were crossed, but her eyes weren't angry, they were focused. "Not yet," he said. "Let's see what else she tries to pull." "Fine, but start saving screenshots, Hoa newsletters, emails, Facebook posts, anything she's said about you publicly." Eller added, "Oh, we've got receipts. She's already posted that we're armed outsiders threatening family values, with our address tagged." Cole was quiet for a beat, then he said, "I take it back. Let's absolutely bury her." That evening, Noah sat by the wood stove sorting through emails. He found one from the HOAS Digital Archive, an announcement Karen had written 2 months ago, claiming that in light of ongoing community confusion, she had stepped in as interim executive president. There was no vote mentioned, no board meeting referenced. Just Karen declaring herself in charge with a line that read, "The community needs strong hands in uncertain times." Noah looked up. She literally made herself queen. Ella nodded. Queen of nothing. They started printing documents, Hoa maps, their property deed, copies of state firearm codes, photos of the property line markers that clearly showed their cabin wasn't inside the Hoa footprint. Every page built their case. But it wasn't just about winning now. It was about exposure. Because Karen wasn't just bluffing, she was building a fantasy, one where she ruled by fear and fine slips, where power came not from law, but from persistence. She thinks she can paper cut us into submission. Noah muttered. Ella cracked her knuckles. She thinks wrong. By midnight, the evidence binder was 3 inches thick. Noah closed it with a snap, exhaled, and stared out the window. The lake was still, moonlight glinting off the water like steel dot across the cove. Karen's porch light blinked on. She was up late, too, plotting her version of justice, writing titles she didn't tone, imagining a courtroom where she was the star. But she had no idea what was coming, because Ella didn't carry her badge in her hand. She carried it in how she walked, how she stood, and how she fought back, and When they stepped into that courtroom, Karen wouldn't just lose, she'd be laughed out of it. Karen Albridge wasn't just meddling, she was orchestrating a theater of control, and she'd cast herself as the star, with her lawsuit officially submitted. She wasted no time letting the entire Pine Briar community know about her heroic stand. Within hours of filing, she blasted a message across the neighborhood Facebook group. Safety comes first. I've taken action to address an armed throw witness near our community docks. No one is above the rules, not even those with badges or titles that don't belong here. As acting president, I will not back down. She included a blurry photo of Ellis standing on her porch. It was so pixelated, most people couldn't even tell what it was. But the message was clear. She was weaponizing fear. Ellis stared at the post from her phone and rolled her eyes. Acting president. When was the election? During karaoke night at her wine club. Noah didn't laugh. He saw the likes stacking up. A few neighbors chimed in with support. Not because they feared Ella, but because Karen had always been loudest. And people defaulted to noise. This could get uglier, he said. We need to move faster. So Noah and Eller drove straight to Cole's office the next morning. A small brick building tucked between a bait shop and an insurance broker. Inside, Cole Rayner was already at his desk, sleeves rolled up, coffee half finished, and a grin spreading across his face. I've been reading Karen's posts all morning, he said, clicking through screenshots on his laptop. She's handed us a defamation claim on a silver platter. He turned the screen toward them. But here's the better part. It was a scanned horror document, the original bylaws, dated and notarized. Section 3 made it very clear. In the event of a president's resignation or departure, an election must be held within 30 days. No interim appointment shall be recognized without board majority approval. Karen had held no vote. There were no signatures, no confirmation. She had simply declared herself president and started using a letterhead like a crown. Cole smirked. She's impersonating a governing officer under civil law. That's not just unethical. It's actionable. Ella leaned forward. Can we prove she knew it was fake? She printed business cards, didn't she? Cole raised a brow. Ordered Hoa branded envelopes. That's intent. Noah rubbed his jaw. She's convinced herself she's right. That's the real danger. Cole leaned back. Well, it's about time someone reminded her what real authority looks like. And I think the courtroom's the perfect place for that. Meanwhile, across the lake, Karen wasn't slowing down. She began handing out flyers labeled Community Protection Notice, a document she claimed was an emergency ordinance spanning open carry near shared horror spaces. She left copies in mailboxes, on doors, even on car windshields during a Sunday church service. One neighbor, retired dentist named Paul, posted a photo of the flyer with the caption, "Is this a joke or did North Korea annex Pine Briar?" Others weren't so amused. A few sent messages to Ella directly. Hey, we support you. But this is getting uncomfortable. Karen's telling people your cabin is a security risk. Are you really a cop, or is that made up too? Eller read each one silently, then put her phone down. She's not just trying to shame me, she said. She's trying to make people doubt the badge. Noah watched her from across the porch. She's trying to win in public before she loses. In court, Cole filed a motion the next day, one that flipped the case completely. Not only did it demand full dismissal of Karen's complaint, but it included a counterclaim for defamation, impersonation of public authority, and malicious prosecution. And, at the bottom of the motion, under exhibits, was a photo of Karen's Hoa flyer, next to the official Pine Briar documents disproving her title. The judge scheduled the hearing. Ella folded her uniform, packed her credentials, and stood a little straighter than usual. Karen had tried to cast her as a threat, but the moment they stepped into that courtroom, the real threat was going to be the truth, and Karen wasn't ready for that spotlight. The courthouse set 2 towns over. A sandstone building with tired bricks, and a lobby that smelled faintly of ink and lemon cleaner. It wasn't a grand arena, but for Karen Ulbridge, it might as well have been the stage of a televised trial. She arrived 30 minutes early, wearing a crisp blue suit, pearls, and a badge-shaped pin that looked suspiciously handmade. Her cousin, a freshly certified paralegal from an online course, trailed behind her with a cardboard box of printouts and plastic binder clips. Nora and Ella arrived just before the hearing began. Ella wore her ranger uniform neatly pressed, badge polished, sidearm holstered. She carried no expression on her face, just the silent weight of experience. Nora walked beside her with quiet confidence, holding the thick evidence binder under one arm. Their attorney, Cole Rayner, was already inside, calm, prepared, sipping from a travel mug and skimming Karen's complaint again like it was a crossword puzzle written in crayon dot. As they entered the courtroom, Karen looked up and gave a tight, smug smile like she'd already won. She whispered something to her cousin, who nodded, then dropped a yellow folder onto the plaintiff table with theatrical flair. The judge entered 5 minutes later. Harold Polk wasn't the type to smile without reason. His glasses hung low on his nose, his voice even and dry. He gave both sides a nod and got straight to business. This is Ulbridge v. Winters. Civil complaint regarding alleged firearm intimidation and violation of horror safety regulations. Karen's cousin stood, clearing his throat too many times before speaking. Your Honor, my client seeks protection for community standards and safety. The defendant, a uniformed officer, was openly carrying a sidearm on residential lakefront property. My client, acting as HOA president, has submitted violation documents per association bylaws. Judge Polk blinked slowly, acting as HOA president. Yes, Your Honor. May I see the minutes confirming that appointment? There was a pause. The cousin opened his folder, shuffled through some sheets, then held up a single piece of paper. This is her formal statement, issued last October. She assumed responsibilities following the former president's departure. The judge frowned. A statement isn't a vote. Was there one? Karen jumped in, voice chipper. Your Honor, the board was between terms. I filled the vacuum. Everyone agreed it was necessary. Polk raised an eyebrow. Everyone. Karen hesitated. Well, I sent an email. No one objected. From the defense table, Cole leaned forward, fingers steepled. Your Honor, we have the horror bylaws here. They clearly state that board positions require a formal vote. No such vote occurred. In fact, Ms. Ulbridge printed her own business cards and declared herself president without board consent. Karen's lips tightened. I acted in the community's interest. Judge Polk sat back in his chair. Ms. Ulbridge, your claim is built on authority that appears entirely self-appointed. Do you have any documents showing jurisdiction over the defendant's property? Karen stiffened. The defendants share shoreline with HOA common areas. That gives the board visual and environmental jurisdiction. Visual jurisdiction. Polk echoed. Karen nodded firmly. If something can be seen by the HOA, it impacts the HOA. A silence fell across the room. Then the judge spoke. I've practiced law for 22 years. I've heard novel arguments. But visual jurisdiction, that's a first. A few chuckles broke out from the audience benches. Karen flushed. Polk turned to Cole. Counselor, do you have property documents on hand? Cole rose smoothly and handed the judge the binder. Original deed, survey maps. The Winters property was established 57 years before Pine Briar formed. Their parcel falls outside Olhoa platted lines. Judge Polk flipped through the pages, nodding, "Very well. Based on this evidence, I see no grounds for Hoer enforcement on the defendant's land. Furthermore, state law permits open carry by licensed officers on private property." He looked at Karen, "Which means your complaint, Ms. Albridge, holds no water." Karen's cousin whispered, "We could appeal." But Polk raised a hand. "We're not done. There's a counterclaim here as well. Malicious prosecution, impersonation of public authority, defamation." Karen blinked, clearly unprepared. Polk leaned forward, eyes sharp. "Ms. Albridge, did you knowingly present yourself as a governing authority when you had no legal claim to that title?" Karen opened her mouth, but no sound came out. The silence was heavier than any outburst, and the room waited. Because the real trial had just begun and Karen's fantasy was unraveling fast. The silence that followed Judge Polk's question seemed to last forever. Karen's mouth hung slightly open, eyes darting between her cousin and the judge, searching for a lifeline that didn't exist. Polk asked again, slower this time, "Did you knowingly present yourself as a governing officer of the Hoer?" Karen cleared her throat. There was no one else stepping up. The board needed leadership. Polk held her gaze. "That wasn't the question." She shifted in her seat. "I acted in good faith. The neighborhood trusted me." From the defense table, Cole tapped fingers against a sheet of paper. "We have 10 public posts and 3 newsletters signed with the title president by Ms. Albridge. She used the full authority to issue warnings, file a complaint against my client, and distribute what she called community protection mandates." Karen interrupted, voice rising, "You're making this sound criminal." "I was trying to protect people." Polk didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Ms. Albridge, you used a title that carries legal and administrative weight. You filed a complaint using that title to establish credibility. That's impersonation of authority under the Civil Code. You didn't just cross a line, you built a stage on the other side of it." Karen's cousin tried to interject, but the judge cut him off. "Sit down. I'm not finished." Polk turned his attention to Ella. "Mrs. Winters, I understand you were carrying a sidearm on your own porch the day of the incident. Can you confirm your credentials?" Ella stood calmly, straightening her uniform. "I'm a certified wildlife enforcement officer for the state. I'm issued a badge. I'm authorized to carry on duty and off. And I've undergone federal, state, and wildlife jurisdiction training." She handed him her laminated ID and certification documents. Polk reviewed them in silence. He flipped through the pages, checked the seal, then glanced back at Karen. "So this entire complaint stems from a ranger standing on her own porch, in uniform, with a legal firearm, on property outside of Hoer jurisdiction." Karen muttered. "She was intimidating. Was she pointing it at you?" "No." "Did she make any threats?" Karen hesitated. "She didn't have to. She was wearing it like a badge." Polk paused. "That's because it is a badge." A ripple of restrained laughter passed through the courtroom. Even the bailiff smirked. Karen's face flushed red. She shifted back in her chair, eyes flicking down, suddenly far less eager to meet anyone's gaze. Cole stood. "Your Honor, we're asking for full dismissal of the plaintiff's complaint, and we request the court proceed to hear the counterclaim." Polk nodded slowly. "Dismissal granted. This complaint is frivolous, without legal standing, and rooted in a misunderstanding of both Hoer authority and state law." He looked directly at Karen now. "You are not a law enforcement officer. You are not a governing official, and you do not speak for any legal body." Karen looked like she was shrinking into her seat. The courtroom, once her imagined stage, had become something far worse, a spotlight she couldn't escape. Noah leaned over to Ella, whispering, "Think she brought a speech for her victory lap?" Ella didn't smile, but her voice was quiet and steady. She thought no one would question her. "That's always how it starts." Cole turned back to the judge. "We'd like to proceed with damages. Our clients have experienced character damage, public shaming, and targeted harassment resulting in both emotional distress and attempted legal interference." The judge nodded again. "We'll reconvene after lunch. I want time to review the counterclaim fully before issuing a ruling." As the courtroom emptied, Karen didn't move. Her cousin quietly packed their documents. No drama, no more smug nods, only the sound of slow defeat outside. Eller finally exhaled. "You think she learned anything?" Cole glanced over his shoulder. "She learned what happens when someone confuses a clipboard with a badge. No, I held the door for them both. Inside, the law had spoken, but outside, the fallout was only beginning. When Judge Polk returned after lunch, the atmosphere had shifted. Karen's cousin looked like he'd aged 5 years in an hour. Karen herself sat stiffly, arms folded so tightly across her chest they seemed welded there. The confidence she once radiated had drained from her face, leaving behind only a quiet dread that seemed to grow with every ticking second. Cole, on the other hand, leaned back casually in his chair, flipping a pen through his fingers. Noah sat quietly, hands folded. Ella remained expressionless, her ranger badge clipped beside her name tag. Calm as ever, the judge began with no preamble. After reviewing the counterclaim, including submitted evidence and public statements made by the plaintiff, this court finds grounds to award damages for defamation, impersonation of authority, and frivolous prosecution. He adjusted his glasses and continued. "The defendant, Mrs. Winters, is a credentialed wildlife officer with a legal right to carry her sidearm on her private property. She acted within the law, posed no threat, and was misrepresented in public forums by the plaintiff in a deliberate attempt to portray her as a danger." Karen shifted, but Polk didn't stop. In addition, the plaintiff assumed authority under a title she was never granted, distributing materials, filing formal complaints, and issuing mandates without her board approval. This constitutes impersonation under civil guidelines, and it misled both the public and the court. The silence in the room was heavy as Polk leaned forward. "Therefore, this court awards the Winters family a judgment of $15,000 in damages. That includes legal fees, reputational harm, and stress incurred by the defendant and her family." Karen's cousin opened his mouth, but said nothing. Polk stood. "This court is adjourned." He struck the gavel once. The echo rang like thunder through Karen's world. Outside the courthouse, Eller didn't gloat. She didn't speak to the reporters who'd caught wind of the oddball case. She simply walked down the steps, badge still clipped to her chest, and helped Noah load the binder back into their truck. "You handled that well," Noah said. Ella shrugged. "I didn't have to handle anything. The truth did that for me." Cole joined them moments later, slipping his phone back into his pocket. "Already got 2 messages from her board members," he said. "Guess who's getting an emergency vote tomorrow?" Noah raised a brow. "Karen." Cole nodded. "They're stripping her of LHOA privileges. She'll be barred from representing the board, attending meetings, even submitting official complaints. She overreached so far. They're worried the whole hoer could get sued next." Noah chuckled. "Well, they let her act like queen long enough." The next week, Karen was removed from every neighborhood position she'd once clung to. The Hoer board issued an official statement acknowledging that her behavior had exceeded boundaries and misrepresented. Pinebriar Estates. Karen tried to fight back with another long Facebook post claiming she'd been politically targeted by extremists who brought weapons into a family-friendly space, but no one listened. The likes were gone, the shares vanished, neighbors unfollowed her. A few even started sharing jokes about President Karen and her imaginary empire. One anonymous post read, "Visual jurisdiction. If I can see your fridge, own your leftovers." Karen turned off comments and deleted her page. 2 weeks after the ruling, Ellis stood on the dock one morning tying a new fishing lure. A neighbor from across the lake, a woman named Tessa, kayaked over and floated near the shoreline. "Hey," Tessa said gently, "just wanted to say, I'm sorry we didn't speak up sooner." Ella glanced over. "You believed her?" Tessa shrugged. "We didn't want to rock the boat. She was always loudest. You were quiet." Ella smiled slightly. "Sometimes, the loudest person is just trying to drown out the truth." Tessa nodded. "Well, she's quiet now." Ella looked across the lake at Karen's darkened house. "Good. Maybe she'll finally hear herself." Inside her home, Karen sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by unopened mail and silence. The title she once wore like a crown had vanished. Her clipboard sat on the floor. Her name had become a punchline. But the worst part wasn't the fine or the loss of power. It was realizing no one believed her anymore. And once that's gone, once the illusion crumbles, there's no rulebook, no fake badge, no Facebook post that can bring it back. Karen Albridge stayed inside for days after the ruling. Curtains drawn. Fun off. The Hoa President bumper magnet peeled off the back of her car and tossed into the trash. She hoped the silence would make it all go away. But no one knew better, and he wasn't done. It started with a phone call. Cole had stayed curious after the trial. Something hadn't sat right. The confidence Karen had shown, the boldness of her flyers, the specific way she'd spoken about shared shoreline jurisdiction. He started pulling zoning records, land disputes, survey maps dating back to when Pinebriar was just 5 scattered homes on lakefront soil. Then he found it. "Hey," Cole said, calling Noah one morning, "you might want to sit down for this." He'd uncovered an old boundary revision from 17 years ago, one Karen had lobbied the county for. It was subtle, barely noticeable. A 10-foot expansion of the Hoa boundary line on the north side of the lake. On paper, it looked like a routine adjustment for public walkway maintenance. But in practice, that change sliced off a sliver of Ella's inherited land that, according to the original deed, had always included a small fishing dock and access ramp. Karen had filed the revision under a trustee's name, her sister's, not hers, and it was signed using a now-deceased notary who'd been later removed from public roles for document mishandling. "She faked a boundary push," Cole said. "Tried to absorb part of your wife's land years ago. It was never enforced, because the whore didn't realize it wasn't legit. But that little revision, it's still on the books." Noah's stomach turned. "You're telling me Karen's been trying to claim our land all this time?" "Not trying. She did. Illegally, quietly. And now we have the paper trail." That weekend, Noah and Ella visited the county recorder's office. They met with a new registrar, a no-nonsense woman named Marlene who, within minutes, pulled up the flagged parcel file and frowned at her screen. "This should not have been approved," Marlene said. "It was signed by a non-title holder. The notary didn't log it with our office, and the Hoa president listed on the form was never officially elected." "You've got yourself a forged adjustment." Eller folded her arms. "So what happens now?" Marlene adjusted her glasses. "It gets reversed, and I'm legally required to report this." She looked up. "You want to go easy on her." Or should I pull the whole file for state review? Eller didn't answer. She looked at Noah. He shook his head slowly. She went after us, falsely, publicly. She dragged my wife's name through the mud. Eller said quietly, pull everything. News traveled fast. The HOA board called another emergency meeting, this time without Karen. They voted to freeze all projects related to the North Lake expansion. They issued a formal apology to Ella and Noah, and they launched a full audit of the community's leadership practices. By Tuesday, Karen's mailbox was stuffed with certified letters. One from the county clerk, one from the HOA, and one from a lawyer she didn't recognize representing the estate of a deceased neighbor whose property had also been listed in that same fraudulent boundary filing. Cole smiled when he saw the news. Turns out you weren't the only one she tried to move off the map. Karen's empire had never been real. But now it was being erased line by line. Neighbors who once stayed silent started speaking up. Stories came out. Fines that had never been voted on. Sidewalk citations she'd written herself. Unauthorized locks she'd installed on shared gates. One couple discovered she'd altered the dates on their landscaping warning to force a $300 fine. Another neighbor realized she'd been sending HOA dues to a private P.O. box, thinking it was official. Eller read the forum threads without saying much, but Noah could see it in her eyes. This wasn't just Karen falling apart. It was her entire illusion collapsing in slow motion, revealed for what it was. Not leadership, not law. Just power hoarding wrapped in stationery. Karen didn't come outside anymore. The clipboard was gone. Her lawn grew patchy and dry, the flower beds unwatered. Someone posted a photo of her peeling mailbox flag with the caption, visual jurisdiction in decline. Cole called again the next morning. You ready for the real kicker? Noah grinned. Do I even want to know? They're filing a claim for restitution. That dock she tried to claim through the revision. Turns out she used HOA funds to rebuild it 10 years ago, on someone else's land. Ella raised an eyebrow. Let me guess. That someone is me. Cole chuckled. She paid to build a dock on your land with other people's money. Noah laughed out loud. So she sued my wife and accidentally gave her a free dock. More than that, Cole said, you legally own it now. The morning after Karen received her final notice from the county assessor's office, her car was gone from the driveway. For the first time in months, her porch sat dark. No clipboard, no coffee cup, no binoculars. She had left quietly, sometime in the night, whether it was a visit to family or a self-imposed exile. No one knew and no one asked. The lake, once echoing with her voice, was still again. Alice stood by the dock that Karen had illegally tried to annex years earlier. Now, that same dock legally belonged to her. County records had been corrected. HOA funds that Karen had funneled into its renovation were documented, and after a brief review, the HOA voted unanimously not to fight the transfer. It was Noah who installed the new plaque, property of Winter's family, private use only. He smiled when he screwed it in. Think she'll ever try to come back? He asked. Ella adjusted her ranger cap, her gaze steady on the glassy water. If she does, she won't find the world waiting for her like it used to. The HOA hosted a community meeting the following week, its first without Karen since she had unofficially seized power. It was quiet, respectful, even hopeful. The new interim board president, a soft-spoken man named Riley Jameson, addressed the group from a folding table. I'd like to start by acknowledging the harm done under false leadership, he said, and thanking the Winters family for standing firm when many of us stayed silent. Ella and Noah sat in the back row. They didn't speak. They didn't have to, Riley continued. We're rewriting the charter. Votes will be transparent. records digital, and every board position will be term limited. The crowd murmured their approval. One elderly neighbor stood and said what everyone else had been thinking. We let one voice speak for too long. It won't happen again. Back at the cabin, Ella finally unpacked the last of the files from their legal ordeal. They'd won in court, corrected the county record, and helped force a long overdue reform in the neighborhood. But that wasn't the victory she cared about. Noah handed her a folder marked Karen. Final. She slid it into the drawer and locked it. It's done, he said. Ella nodded. She made noise. We made change. A month passed. Then another. Karen's name was barely spoken, now reduced to a half-joke and a cautionary tale. She didn't attend the next HOA vote, her house set for sale. But no one made an offer. The lawn browned under the summer sun. The mailbox leaned forward, as if ashamed to stand straight. Ella never gloated. She didn't believe in that dot, but she did believe in boundaries. And finally, the boundaries have been restored not by shouting, but by truth, law, and quiet resolve. It was late August when Noah noticed something curious. A letter, addressed to them, with no return label, just careful handwriting on the envelope. Inside was a single sheet. I thought I was protecting something. What I was really doing was hiding from it. I don't expect forgiveness, but I owe you honesty. The dock was never mine. The power never was either. I see that now. I hope you'll take care of the place better than I did. No name. But it didn't need one. Ella folded it without a word and tucked it into her journal. Not forgiveness, but an admission. And that was enough. The cabin returned to peace. The frogs sang again at dusk. Ella resumed her lake patrols. Noah rebuilt the old canoe shed. The community adjusted like a spine, realigning sore at first, then stronger. One day, while trimming the hedges near the dock, Noah saw a child riding by on a bike, followed by a couple walking their dog. The boy stopped, pointed at the dock sign, and asked his dad, "Is that the dock the president tried to steal?" The dad chuckled. "That's the one." The boy squinted. "Why'd she think it was hers?" The dad replied, "Because she thought if she talked loud enough, no one would ask questions." The boy nodded like it made sense, then rode off. That night, as the sun dipped low and lit the lake in copper and flame, Noah sat with Ella on the porch, coffee steaming between them. She really thought she could own everything she looked at, he said. Ella looked out across the still water. "That's not ownership. That's fear disguised as control." He turned to her. "You're not afraid of much, are you?" She gave a rare smile. "No. But I'm allergic to bullies." In the end, Karen lost the title she gave herself. Ella didn't take it from her. She just waited long enough for the truth to take it back. And in Pinebriar, that truth still echoed quietly, powerfully across the water.